excess of 25% of all the troops returning from deployments in the Middle East suffer some type of post-traumatic stress disorder, and that approximately 75 individuals have committed suicide on this particular base in Texas within the last 6 years. So we have to consider, the cumulative effect of dealing with people who are in stress, who have been in combat, and who have shared their stories with him, what impact that might have had on him, especially as you and Senator Kay Bailey Hutchinson discussed, with him being upset about orders that he was receiving to go to that same area where people had just come from that he had treated.
The senator also allowed that he was from Jordan. Now we're not sure about his roots ethnically, where his parents, he obviously, we know that he went to school in Virginia. He went to Virginia Tech, which carries a lot of irony in that. Obviously, he had a degree from biochemistry. He also went to the U.S. Military School for Further Education. He had a psychiatric residency. Then he went to Fort Hood this July of this year. He was recently promoted. We've also heard that he had a bad performance record. His performance evaluations were negative. It seems to me, though, that if he was deployed overseas, he must have been doing pretty well. His efficiency, his aptitudes were high enough for him to go overseas. He could have been that bad off.
The challenge, Chris, is when you get into the military and you look at the finite number of psychiatrists, who, of course, is a medical doctor and a psychologist who has that background, the number of men and women that we have with those degrees and with that ability. Right now we have about one mental health expert in the military per 750 men, women who are in that military. So they have a tremendous number of people they have to shepherd, they have to deal with. And just to retain someone like him, as you know, as a medical doctor, you come into the Army as a captain. So he made one rank, captain to major, and a lot of times, unless you do something terrible, the military is going to want to retain a medical doctor, and they'll make that promotion just because of the finite number of people with his background that they actually have.
The people that fight for the United States overseas now, who serve in the military in Afghanistan, especially now because it's such a war front and it's so dangerous over there now, seem to me they fight in a different kind of terrain, Clinton, in the old days. In the old days, you were fighting armor, you're fighting artillery, you're fighting air attacks, you're fighting, if you're at sea, you're fighting air attacks. There's also naval combat. What they're fighting is the daily need to have to keep moving around in Afghanistan or Iraq, stepping on mines, IEDs, that are controlled. It seems like that is almost like being in a constant booby trap. Every day, every moment, you're constantly walking over terrain could blow your leg up, blow your head off. What does that do in terms of stress? And what does that do to a doctor who has to daily treat people who've lived through that hell?
Well, I was an Army intelligence agent in Vietnam, and I did that for a year, Chris. But I didn't do what these men and women do today, and I think you make an important point. Far more of our troops are killed by improvised explosive devices than they are head-to-head combat. The enemy, whoever we define the enemy is, does not go head-to-head by and large in troop movements with us. They're setting off bombs on the roadside, so our men and women, they have to know everywhere they go, not only are they looking for somebody to pop up with a rifle, but it could be some innocent carcass of a dead dog alongside the road that contains a bomb that could kill them. So they are, every second of the day, they have to be leaning forward in the saddle, realizing that not just that bullet, but that bomb can be coming at them. This is what our men and women are returning with, having lived through that. And Chris, as you know, they're going through this 2 and 3 deployments. We're asking more, I think, than we've ever asked of our men and women to go through this much, this many times.
And to read and to see the limited amount I have seen when I've been to Walter Reed, but more importantly, what I've seen in the paper of people with whole legs blown off, one leg and almost all of the other one, having to make it the rest of their life like that, having best buddies, best friends in that condition, and spending months and years alongside them after they've been maimed in that way, seeing their efforts to try to rebuild their lives. They're young, they're great-looking young people, they're tremendously alive, and yet they have these wounds, these incredible wounds with the filth and dirt of battle being blown into their bodies as part of these explosions. And all the time they're up against some terrible enemy with his own religious, political motive for believing they can do the worst to him, and they can just punch some garage door opener from 200 yards away and enjoy the delight of watching, to them, a foreigner, an infidel, being blown to bits and having to live in that life for months and years. And how many deployments they're getting now? 2 and 3?
2 and 3 at least. I've talked to men and women who have done 3 separate deployments and who anticipate they may have to do a 4th one. You know, Chris, not only does that impact on the individual soldier, Marine, airman, whoever it may be, but the families that are left behind, too, that have to wait and every day have to consider. I was in Vietnam for a year, Chris. My mother, I was single. My mother took up smoking because it bothered her so much that I was in that combat zone. If you take my mother and multiply that tens of thousands of troops that are being deployed overseas, we see that multiplication effect that it's having on all of our families in this country.
What do you make of the fact that he has this name, Nadal Hassan? We can't make any judgments. It's his background. We all have backgrounds. We all have different names, European names, African names, all kinds of names in this country without making any judgment. Would he have been subject to any kind of problem in the military with that name, or is it familiar enough to have a name with it? Apparently has a Middle Eastern background somewhere in the family. Does that add to the stress of being a military man these days, to have that background in the Middle East where we're fighting these wars?
I don't know that he would have any stress or problems with the men and women that he worked with. I think one of my questions, Chris, would be what impact would his fellow countrymen, would his fellow people that he knows from the Middle East have about him being a part of the American military? I think that's where the FBI hopefully is going to find out when they look at his letters, when they look at his email, his communications. They're doing a number of things. Number one, they're trying to find out if he was part of a conspiracy or if he was just some lone wolf who did this for his own personal reasons. But number two, if he wasn't directed to do this by someone else, what type of philosophy had he embraced that might have contributed to him doing this? Realize, once again, Chris, this is an incident that he could not have expected to get away with. It was a terrible, terrible form of suicide, and he took all these others with him.
Why would someone with any kind of political problem with our military involvement in the Middle East seek higher office, move up in the ranks as successfully as this guy did? I'm just looking at this deductively without making a judgment about him, but how could a person proceed up to the rank of major who didn't like the war, who didn't like the policy?
Well, and
maybe it happens all the time. Maybe there are people in the military all the time who don't like the President of the United States at any given time, don't like the philosophy of the government in power, don't like the war policy. I'm sure there are all kinds of people that you come across, but
Chris, the one thing that all servicemen and women share that they embrace is that most of them would give up their life for their friend, their buddy, the person next to them. That's part of that camaraderie that the military brings about. And here is someone who was supposed to save lives. He took an oath as a medical doctor to save lives, and he chose this day and this time to make this terrible statement. And remember, it wasn't that long ago where we had a group of medical doctors in Scotland that tried to bomb an airport. So we see this individuals with a medical degree but still are acting out for their own personal and sometimes political and religious reasons that go far beyond that oath they took as a medical doctor.